Today, we are undertaking a monumental task. We're examining the life and work of Alan Turing.
Right, and he's arguably the single most influential figure of the 20th century. I mean, his genius basically underpins the entire digital existence you are currently enjoying.
It really does. His life was so tragically brief, but the sheer volume of his contributions is it's staggering.
Yeah, it is. We're deep diving into a collection of articles, research notes, and they cover everything. His theoretical work, which, invented the very concept of computation,
The cryptography that won World War II.
his radical foresight in artificial intelligence, and even his groundbreaking work in mathematical biology.
Our mission today is to really trace Turing's intellectual journey. How did he move so seamlessly from these abstract philosophical questions about math to engineering machines that literally changed the world?
And we need to understand the breathtaking breadth of his genius, but also the painful, tragic context of his personal life. A tragedy driven, really, by the very society he helped to save.
Exactly. We're talking about the Turing machine, the theoretical blueprint for every computing device ever made.
And cracking the Enigma code.
Defining the path for AI decades before the technology even existed.
And a whole host of surprising facts about everything from, zebra stripes to the secrets of quantum physics.
What becomes so clear when you study these sources is the intense interdisciplinarity of his mind. He stands alongside maybe a handful of peers.
Like John von Neumann.
Exactly, John von Neumann, as a true pioneer of the modern scientific method. They saw that the same mathematical structure could be used to model phenomena in what seemed like totally disparate fields.
Right. Biology, economics, pure physics.
All unified by the power of computation.
It's a profound, unifying kind of intellect. And in this deep dive, we're going to tackle the fundamental questions that Turing himself wrestled with.
Like, what are the absolute limits of mechanical calculation?
And why, in theoretical terms, do our computers sometimes just freeze?
And maybe the biggest question of all, can genuine, thoughtful, intelligent machines ever actually exist?
Yeah, and we have to start with a difficult truth. His immense wartime success, all his intellectual accomplishments, they were tragically curtailed.
They were. In 1952, he was convicted under these archaic laws regarding his sexuality. It led to a profound depression and ultimately his death by suicide in 1954. He was just 41.
The injustice committed against him is just a profound stain on modern history, and it adds this layer of sorrow to every single achievement we're about to discuss.
It really does.
So let's begin at the very beginning. With the theoretical foundation he established back in the 1930s.
Right.
We know mechanical calculating devices have been around for centuries, right? Stretching back to Pascal and Leibniz in the 17th century.
Sure.
But Leibniz had a larger ambition. He dreamed of a machine that could think, or at least systematize all of reason. It was really Turing who provided the theoretical rigor for that ambition.
And his early life certainly prepared him for thinking outside of established systems. He was born in 1912. His parents were often away working in the Indian Civil Service.
So he had a less structured upbringing than many of his peers.
Much less. And he was far more interested in puzzles, natural patterns, and numbers than the classical literature and religion that were so prized by the traditional British education system.
So he wasn't the ideal British schoolboy, in other words.
Not at all. But his intellectual ability was. It was undeniable, even in those early peculiar interests. We read sources detailing his attempts to, map the flight paths of bees to locate their hives.
Oh, wow.
Or figuring out the exact number of rotations it took before his bicycle chain would slip off. He was just obsessed with finding the underlying algorithm in the world around him.
His time at Sherborne, which was a traditional public school, was marked by conflict. But his whole trajectory changed when he befriended Christopher Morcom.
Right. Morcom shared his passion for science and mathematics. And when Morcom died suddenly from tuberculosis just 2 years later, it triggered this deep intellectual and philosophical crisis in Turing.
The sources really suggest this was a genuinely pivotal moment for him.
It seems to have been. His grief spurred him toward these huge existential questions about the human mind, how consciousness, which he saw so clearly in his friend, could be embodied in matter.
And whether its mechanisms might even be related to the brand new field of quantum mechanics.
Which is just an astonishingly mature philosophical leap for a 16-year-old.
Absolutely.
And that intense quest for certainty, for the physical mechanics of thought, that brings us to the core of his breakthrough in 1936. Turing was working in a field of mathematics that had just been fundamentally shaken.
Okay, tell us about that seismic event.
It was Kurt Gödel. In 1931, Gödel published his incompleteness theorems,
Mhm.
and he proved that within any formal mathematical system, there would always be true statements that could neither be proven nor disproven using the system's own axioms.
So they were unresolvable.
Exactly, and this just destroyed the quest for absolute logical certainty that giants like Bertrand Russell had dedicated their entire lives to.
So if math wasn't perfectly logical, the entire foundation of human reasoning seemed vulnerable. What was the reaction to that?
Well, David Hilbert, one of the most respected mathematicians of their era, issued a famous challenge in response: the Entscheidungsproblem.
The problem of decision.
Right. The question was, could a mechanical fixed procedure, an algorithm, essentially determine the truth or falsehood of any given mathematical assertion?
And if the answer was no,
Then mathematics wasn't purely logical, and that search for an absolute bedrock of knowledge was over.
so Turing's answer to this huge abstract philosophical challenge was equally abstract, but revolutionary. The automatic machine, or a machine.
Which today we call the Turing machine.
Right.
And it is the simplest possible conceptual computer. It's meticulously designed to replicate the actions of a human computing clerk performing a calculation. Let's break down its simplicity, because that's really where the power lies.
Okay, so let's start with the memory.
First, you have the infinite tape. This is the machine's memory, and it's theoretically boundless, running in one dimension.
And it uses a really simple alphabet, right? Just 0, 1, or a blank.
Exactly. It established that memory doesn't need to be physically complex. It just needs to exist.
Okay, then the mechanism to manipulate that memory.
That's the read-write head. And it can only do three things: read the symbol on the tape, optionally erase that symbol and write a new one, and then move one cell to the left or to the right. It's deliberately constrained.
And finally, there's a small internal register.
Right, which holds the machine's current state, a finite condition, let's say S1, S2, S3.
And the program itself, how does that work?
That's the table of transitions. You can think of it as the machine's finite instruction set, the protocol that dictates the next move.
And it works based on two inputs.
Two inputs: the current state it's in and the symbol it just read. Based on that combination, the table dictates three outputs: the next state to transition to, the new symbol to write on the tape, and the direction to move.
That sounds incredibly formal.
Yeah.
Can you give us a quick practical analogy for how that set of rules translates into an actual calculation?
Sure. Imagine the Turing machine is following a simple algorithm, say finding the first time the sequence 11 appears and replacing it with 00.
Okay.
The table might have a rule that looks like this: if you are in state S1 and you read a 1, then write a blank, move left, and transition to state S2. Then another rule: if you are in state S2 and you read a 1, then write 0, move right, and transition to state S3. Every single decision is mechanical and unambiguous. It's a pure sequence of logic.
And that is the definition of a calculation.
Precisely.
That simple abstract model has monumental implications, especially when he introduced the next step, the universal Turing machine.
The U machine, precisely. The basic A machine only performs one fixed algorithm. The U machine is a Turing machine that is sophisticated enough to read the instructions of any other Turing machine from its own tape and then simulate it.
So it can execute any conceivable calculation.
Anyone. And this is the theoretical blueprint for the modern stored program computer you are using right now.
The existence of that U machine led directly to the Church-Turing thesis, which sets the boundaries of computability.
Right. The thesis, which he developed with Alonzo Church, is elegant. It says the U machine can solve any problem whose solution can be expressed as an algorithm.
Which means the universe of mathematical problems solvable by a machine is exactly the same as the universe of problems solvable by a perfectly diligent human calculator.
Exactly.
And when we talk about an algorithm for the audience, we should probably move beyond the simple idea of a washing machine cycle. Let's define it as a finite sequence of clear, unambiguous steps that, given a defined input, always halts and produces a verifiable output.
A perfect example in modern computing would be the logic used by a search engine to rank results. The process is incredibly complicated, involving thousands of variables, but it's finite and it's mechanical.
It processes your search query, follows defined steps, and produces a finite result.
Right, the search page.
Okay, so building on this concept of the Turing machine, let's look at the consequences. Because defining what a computer can do also defines what it cannot do. And this brings us back to Hilbert's challenge and the most famous limitation he discovered: the halting problem.
The halting problem asks this fundamental question: Is it possible to design a generalized program, let's call it H, that can take any other program P and its input I and predict infallibly whether P will eventually stop or halt, or whether it will run forever, freezing the computer?
This is the core theoretical reason your computer sometimes hangs or freezes, because there's no overarching mechanism to predict termination in advance.
Exactly. And Turing proved, using a beautiful logical paradox, that this universal H program is impossible to write. We should probably walk through that paradox slowly.
Please do.
Okay, so imagine you successfully write the program H. Now you construct a new program, let's call it P paradox, that uses H as a subroutine and takes its own source code as its input.
A program feeding itself its own source code, that's already getting tricky.
It is. So the definition of P paradox is this. If the subroutine H predicts that P paradox will halt, then P paradox is instructed to enter an infinite loop and never halt.
Okay.
And conversely, if H predicts that P paradox will not halt, then P paradox is instructed to immediately stop or halt.
Oh, I see the contradiction immediately. P-paradox is explicitly programmed to do the exact opposite of whatever the universal predictor H says it's going to do.
That's the logical knot. If H is accurate, it must be wrong. And if H is wrong, it must be accurate. The only way to resolve this contradiction is to conclude that the universal prediction program H cannot exist.
The halting problem is fundamentally unresolvable by a Turing machine.
Right. He proved that not all mathematical questions are decidable by mechanical means, which gave the rigorous negative answer to Hilbert's and Scheidung's problem.
That is truly astonishing foresight. He established the theoretical limits of computation before the physical computer even existed.
That theoretical work was published in 1936. By 1939, the question of computational limits suddenly became a matter of life and death.
Moving from abstract mathematics to high-stakes cryptography.
Right, and the mathematical framework of decidability was the conceptual weapon he needed to attack a massive search problem, the German Enigma cipher.
And so Turing was recruited immediately to Bletchley Park, the Center for the Government Code and Cipher School, working in Hut 8 on naval codes.
The enemy system was the Enigma, a complex electromechanical machine perfected by the Nazis. It looked innocuous, kind of like a sophisticated typewriter.
But the Germans felt supremely confident in its security, especially for communicating with U-boats in the Battle of the Atlantic.
And their confidence was based on math. The complexity came from the internal rotors, the reflector, and the plug board. Every time a letter was typed, the rotors, usually 3, sometimes 4 or more, would turn.
Which ensured that the same input letter, say A, was encrypted differently each time.
Exactly. X the first time, J the second. And the number of possible configurations, the key space, was a truly staggering 10 to the power of 114.
That's a number far larger than the estimated number of atoms in the entire observable universe.
Right. Manual search was utterly impossible.
But we have to pause here to recognize that the cracking process did not start from scratch in Britain. Polish mathematicians, led by the brilliant Marian Rejewski, had already established the foundation in the 1930s.
Absolutely crucial context. Rejewski and his colleagues first broke the code by exploiting a critical German procedural error.
They transmitted the rotor's starting position twice.
Yes. And this repetition provided a fixed point, a cryptographic crib, which allowed them to use early electromechanical devices, including the original Polish bomba, to reconstruct the internal wiring of the rotors.
But when the Germans added more rotors in 1938, the Poles realized the effort needed to break the code had just expanded beyond their national resources.
So they wisely handed over their methodology and all their technical details to the British and French just before the invasion.
And this is where Turing's genius truly shone. Building on that Polish work, he designed the next-generation machine capable of handling the vastly increased complexity, Turing's bomb.
The bomb, built by Harold Keen, was this immense electromechanical machine. It used 108 rotating drums organized in groups of 3 to physically and electrically simulate the mechanics of multiple Enigma machines running in parallel.
And its goal wasn't to decrypt messages directly.
No, not at all. Its goal was to perform a cryptanalytic search to work backward to find the daily Enigma settings, which rotors were used, in what order, and how the plug board was connected.
And this required the famous crib method to set the initial conditions for the search.
Exactly. The crib was a guessed plain text fragment based on protocol or intercept knowledge, maybe something like weather report or...
No unusual incidents to report.
Something very German and predictable. The operator would set up the bomb's electrical connections, the menu, to test for contradictions against the intercepted ciphertext. based on that known Enigma rule that no letter could encrypt to itself.
But cycling through 10 to the 114th possibilities was still impossible. How did Turing narrow the search space?
He developed these incredibly sophisticated statistical methods. This is where we need to get into a specific procedure he co-developed called Banburismus. It was a statistical weighting technique used to score potential decryptions and eliminate rotor positions that were highly unlikely to be correct and that drastically reduced the number of permutations the bomb had to test.
So can you elaborate on how Banburismus provided that statistical edge?
Think of it like a weight of evidence score. Turing knew that certain letter combinations, when encrypted, tended to occur more frequently in German than others.
Right.
So by assigning numerical weights to observed coincidences or non-coincidences between different ciphertexts, cryptanalysts could assign a probability score to a potential rotor setting. If a score was too low, that setting was automatically thrown out.
Sometimes eliminating millions of impossible configurations without the bomb ever having to test them.
And it made the entire process 10 times faster.
The logistics of this operation must have been just enormous.
By the war's end, there were 211 bombs operating around the clock, staffed by thousands of workers, mostly women, who handled the tedious manual labor of setting the cribs and logging the results.
And the success was vital. The decrypted intelligence, codenamed Ultra, informed strategic decisions. It allowed convoys to evade U-boat wolf packs in the crucial Battle of the Atlantic.
It shaved potentially years off the conflict. Turing was recognized with the Order of the British Empire in 1945 for his efforts.
But Enigma wasn't the only system the British had to break. The Germans also used a high-level teleprinter cipher machine, the Lorenz SC4042, codenamed Tunny by the British.
And this was a machine far more complex than Enigma. Unlike Enigma's substitution cipher, Lorenz used a sequence of 12 internal pinwheels to generate a 5-bit pseudorandom stream,
Which was then combined with the Baudot code of the teleprinted character using a Boolean XOR operator.
Right, and this sequence was used for high-level command and control messages, making it absolutely vital to break.
So the British countermeasure was the legendary Colossus. This machine, developed by Tommy Flowers, became the world's first large-scale electronic programmable device.
It was a necessary technological leap. The earlier electromechanical decoders struggled because the paper tapes carrying the cipher data often ripped at the high speeds they needed.
And Colossus solved this by replacing mechanical relays with electronics.
Yes, it used approximately 1,500 electronic vacuum tubes, which acted as incredibly fast switches, to implement Boolean logic, processing 5,000 characters per second.
That transition from mechanical switches to electronic valves, that's the moment the digital age really begins in a physical sense.
It is. We can estimate that the raw processing speed of Colossus was similar to an early 2000s Pentium microprocessor. It used Boolean logic gates and/or realized through these tubes to perform its analysis. The power was enormous for the time.
However, we do need to clarify its relationship to Turing's theory. Colossus was powerful, but was it a universal machine?
Crucially, no. Colossus was a quasi-computer. It was highly programmable. Yes, you could configure it to execute complex algorithms via plug panels and switches, but it was designed and built only to break the Lorenz cipher,
It wasn't a general-purpose machine capable of simulating any algorithm.
which is the definition of a universal Turing machine. Nonetheless, the engineering know-how they gained, especially on how to reliably use thousands of vacuum tubes, was vital.
And then there's the tragic historical footnote we just can't overlook. Secrecy.
It is genuinely heartbreaking. After the war, Churchill ordered the total destruction of all the Colossus machines and the bombs and all the documentation.
The fear was that the technology or the methods might fall into enemy hands in the burgeoning Cold War.
Right, and this meant that the engineers and cryptographers were sworn to silence for decades. And this severe state-imposed secrecy ensured that the American ENIAC, built in 1946, was credited as the first electronic computer.
And the crucial British contributions, rooted in Turing's theoretical work, were just lost to history until the 1970s.
A real tragedy.
With the war over, Turing had proven his theoretical model was viable. He joined the National Physical Laboratory in London with one clear goal: to build a full-scale, general-purpose, universal Turing machine.
And he named it the Automatic Computing Engine, or ACE, honoring Charles Babbage, the Victorian father of mechanical computation.
Right. And in 1946, Turing presented a complete, detailed design encompassing both the hardware specifications and the necessary software framework.
And this design contained a revolutionary insight that separates the ACE from the American machines being built at the same time.
What was that?
Well, this is where Turing's deep understanding of theoretical computation manifested practically. Early American machines like ENIAC, they relied on dedicated electronic circuits for every complex arithmetic operation, a circuit for multiplication, another for division, and so on.
Very hardware intensive.
Very. And Turing insisted on replacing these specialized circuits with software modules stored in the machine's memory.
Why was that approach so radical?
It made the ACE vastly more economical and, most importantly, infinitely more versatile. By moving the complexity from the fixed hardware to easily modifiable software, the machine could be programmed for entirely new tasks without physically rewiring components.
That principle, the interchangeability of software, is the defining feature of modern computing.
It is.
But he had to find a physical equivalent for his theoretical infinite tape. The memory solutions of that era sound like something out of science fiction.
They really do. The initial design relied on mercury delay lines. These use the physical properties of sound waves traveling through a tube of mercury.
How does that even work?
Well, data, the electrical pulses for zeros and ones, was converted into high-frequency ultrasonic waves. These waves traveled through the mercury and then at the far end were converted back into electrical pulses.
So it was delaying the data to store it.
Exactly. And while it seems primitive, this provided remarkably fast access times for the era, around 222 microseconds.
The final, simplified machine was the Pilot ACE, which ran its first program in 1950. Using about 800 electronic tubes, it was one of the fastest computers in the world at 1 megahertz. But we need to place this in the context of the emerging global standard, the one defined by his Princeton acquaintance, John von Neumann.
Ah, yes. Von Neumann's 1945 paper, the first draft of a report on EBAC, solidified the architecture that really dominates computing to this day, the von Neumann architecture.
What are the key elements of this architecture that made it the global blueprint?
It formally defined the 4 essential components: the input-output system, the arithmetic logic unit, or ALU, for executing calculations, the control unit to manage the execution sequence, and the unified main memory, or RAM.
And the crucial innovation was the stored program concept.
Yes. Programs and data reside in the same physical memory space, making the machine inherently flexible and universal. While Turing independently arrived at very similar conclusions, von Neumann's comprehensive report circulated rapidly in the US.
And so we had this intense UKS rivalry in the late 1940s. The UK had Colossus, the Manchester baby, EDSE, Pilot ACE.
While the US had ENIAC, which, while it was operational in 1946, was a behemoth.
18,000 tubes, 27 tons.
Yeah.
And it was initially non-binary, using decimal numbers. Programming it involved physically rewiring it.
So, despite the UK holding this early lead in technological innovation and theoretical principles, Britain utterly lost the race to commercialize computing. Why did the country that invented the computer essentially sacrifice the industry?
This leads to a painful political truth found in our sources, particularly the work of Turing's biographers.
The critical point is geopolitical focus. After World War II, the U.S. passed the McMahon Act in 1946, which cut off nuclear collaboration with Britain.
Right.
And Andrew Hodges details how the British government then became strategically fixated on developing its own independent nuclear deterrent. The priority shifted entirely to the atomic bomb, meaning that the government-backed resources, the funding, and the brilliant minds, many of whom had been solving cryptographic problems, were immediately diverted toward atomic research and defense parity.
And the commercialization of computing was left to the private sector and suffered from a lack of strategic national investment.
It's a huge strategic irony. The nation that won the war, thanks to cryptanalysis and electronic calculation, sacrificed its technological future dominance for military independence in the Cold War.
And that strategic vacuum allowed the United States, through massive government contracts and emerging commercial giants like UNIVAC and later IBM, to seize control of the computer industry.
And establish the global dominance we still observe today.
In 1948, Turing left the NPL and joined the University of Manchester, where he pursued the ultimate goal of his life's work: artificial intelligence. He wasn't just interested in machines that could calculate.
No, he wanted machines that could reason, think, and even learn.
He was deeply influenced by philosophers like Michael Polanyi and set his sights on creating a machine capable of performing tasks traditionally reserved for the human mind.
Things like proving theorems, translating languages, and perhaps most famously, playing chess.
Right. And we have these great anecdotes from this period, like him programming the Manchester computer Madam to compose quirky love letters.
Which demonstrates that he saw computers as tools for creativity as much as calculation.
But the perennial philosophical challenge of AI is defining concepts like mind or consciousness. How did Turing, with his logical rigor, manage to bypass that roadblock?
He did it with characteristic elegance. He sidestepped the problem entirely. Instead of asking the metaphysically loaded question, can a machine think, he focused on behavior.
Okay.
He reasoned that if a machine behaves intelligently, if it acts, communicates, and processes information in a way that is indistinguishable from a human, then the question of its internal consciousness becomes, for all practical purposes, irrelevant.
This is the behavioral approach to AI.
Exactly, which gives us the famous Turing test, proposed in his seminal 1950 paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, initially framed as the imitation game.
The setup is deliberately simple, isn't it? A human interrogator is communicating via keyboard and screen with two hidden entities, another human and a machine.
And if, after a period of intense questioning, the interrogator cannot reliably distinguish which is the human and which is the machine.
The machine has successfully passed the test. It has demonstrated intelligence, functionally speaking.
Right, and it's a concept so powerful that its inverse is used millions of times every single day to protect websites.
The CAPTCHA, the completely automatic public Turing test to tell computers and humans apart.
Exactly. It's designed to ensure the user is not a program. Whether it's deciphering distorted letters or clicking on images of fire hydrants, the goal is to present a task that is simple for human cognitive processing but difficult for spiralized AI pattern recognition.
It's a direct homage to Turing's behavioral focus.
It is.
The Turing test immediately polarized the academic community, and it established the two core schools of AI thought.
You have the strong AI camp, which predicts that eventually computers will not just simulate intelligence, but achieve genuine consciousness, self-awareness, and intent, a machine mind.
And opposing them is the weak AI camp,
Which holds that computers are and always will be just sophisticated simulators. They're useful for modeling intelligence, but they lack true understanding or feeling.
Turing was already focused on practical implementation, namely chess, years before the test was even published.
Indeed. He developed an early chess program called Turing with Donald Mitchie.
And because the computers of the early 1950s lacked the memory and speed to run the program fully,
He would manually execute the algorithm on paper, acting as the machine itself in games against his colleagues, which is just an extraordinary demonstration of patience and belief in the mechanical nature of reasoning.
he famously predicted that by the year 2000, machines would be playing chess at a high level and potentially passing his test.
And he was remarkably prescient about computational parity. While a machine has not yet definitively passed the general Turing test, the 2003 draw between chess champion Garry Kasparov and the program X3D Fritz confirmed that algorithmic problem-solving could match or even surpass human capability in certain complex domains.
His biological interests, which we talked about earlier, significantly informed his approach to machine learning.
He saw the connections between computing and neuroscience. He was influenced by discoveries regarding the structure of neurons by scientists like Ramon Cajal.
And Turing conceptualized the newborn human brain not as a fully programmed computer, but as a disorganized machine.
Right. A machine that, through experience and training, gradually organizes itself and learns to function as a universal machine by adulthood.
And this ties into the mathematical modeling of the neuron by McCulloch and Pitts.
Yes. In the 1940s, neurophysiologists Warren McCulloch and Walter Pitts showed that a biological neuron could be mathematically modeled as a simple threshold logic unit, basically a Boolean operator.
They demonstrated that by adjusting the weights assigned to the inputs and the neuron's activation threshold, a simple circuit could be made to function as an AND gate, an OR gate, or a NOT gate.
And this provided the foundation for building artificial learning systems.
And Turing ran with it. He designed artificial neuron circuits, specifically his Type A and Type B machines. Type A machines were non-trainable, but the Type B machines were groundbreaking.
Using electronic components, NAND gates, to simulate neurons, they included training fibers, labeled P and I, which allowed the connection strengths, the weights, to be adjusted dynamically based on input.
So the machine was actively modifying its own instruction set.
Exactly. The machine learned by adjusting those connections until a successful outcome was achieved, anticipating the architecture of modern artificial neural networks used today for everything from deep learning to speech recognition.
It just took decades for the physical technology, the powerful processors and vast data sets to catch up to the theoretical learning models he had laid out in the 1940s.
An amazing mind.
Turing's restless intellect led him to his final research phase, starting around 1952. Mathematical biology, or biomathematics. This was a radical departure, using the computer not for codes or calculation, but as a test tube to simulate the mechanics of life.
He was utterly captivated by the problem of morphogenesis, how living organisms grow and develop their specific shapes and patterns. He looked closely at natural geometry, like the spirals of seeds on a sunflower head or the scutes on a pine cone.
And he linked these organic patterns back to pure mathematics, specifically the Fibonacci sequence.
He noted that the number of spirals moving clockwise and counterclockwise on a sunflower head are almost always two consecutive Fibonacci numbers.
Like 21 and 34, or 34 and 55.
Exactly. And furthermore, the ratio of consecutive Fibonacci numbers consistently approximates the golden section, or 1.61803. He was one of the first researchers to prove that these seemingly mystical, harmonious patterns were the result of underlying quantifiable mathematical processes.
But the most famous biological mystery he attempted to solve was the formation of skin patterns. The seemingly simple question, how do zebra stripes or leopard spots form?
This is where his reaction diffusion theory comes in. The prevailing theory was vague. Turing gave it a chemical mathematical foundation. He proposed that embryonic tissue starts out stable, but patterns emerge due to the interaction of two types of hypothetical molecules he called morphogens.
Okay, describe the two morphogens and how they interact to create this instability.
You have the activator, which promotes the growth of the pattern, the pigment, the stripe, or the spot. And you have the inhibitor, which slows the pattern's growth and effectively neutralizes the activator.
And the key insight is their differing diffusion rates.
Right. They move differently through the tissue.
So what did he hypothesize?
Turing hypothesized that the activator diffuses slowly, meaning its influence is localized, creating a small bump or spike of pigment. The inhibitor, however, diffuses quickly. It spreads far and wide, neutralizing the activator everywhere around the initial spike.
So this creates a ring of stabilization, preventing the growth of the pattern immediately adjacent to the first spot.
And this differential movement dictates the final design.
I see.
Yes. If the inhibitor spreads very quickly relative to the activator, it suppresses pattern growth efficiently, resulting in small, isolated island spots, like a leopard.
And if the diffusion rates are closer?
Or constrained by the geometry of the tissue, the pattern forms in parallel ways, stripes, like a zebra. Turing showed that these patterns, the concentration traces of the morphogens, could be entirely modeled using coupled partial differential equations.
And his reaction diffusion equations remain foundational to modern developmental biology.
They do.
His capacity for applying computational thinking across such wildly divergent fields, from cryptography to embryology, is staggering. And his foresight extends even further, back to his earliest philosophical interest, quantum mechanics.
That early interest in QM led to the ultimate theoretical extension of his machine, the quantum Turing machine, formally developed later by David Deutsch in 1985. Turing knew his classical model had definitive limits, set by the halting problem.
And the shift is fundamental, from bits to qubits.
Right. Classical bits are definitive states, 0 or 1. Qubits, leveraging quantum phenomena, can exist in a superposition of 0 and 1 simultaneously.
They can also be entangled linked, such that measuring one instantly influences the state of another, irrespective of distance.
And this parallel processing capacity suggests a way to solve problems that are currently non-computable, or at least impossibly complex for a classical machine.
Yet potentially allows computation to reach beyond the theoretical limits he established for classical systems.
Right. Quantum computers are being developed precisely to tackle classes of problems currently deemed computationally intractable, those with immense search spaces or variable dependencies that would take a classical supercomputer longer than the age of the universe to resolve.
The potential impact on cryptography, material science, and climate modeling is revolutionary, all built on the abstract model he established in 1936.
And that brings us to the end of his short, impactful life. He created the intellectual and technological framework for the digital world.
And yet, in 1952, he was arrested and subjected to a terrible injustice. He was charged with indecency and given a choice between imprisonment and chemical castration via hormonal therapy.
Which consisted of forced estrogen injection.
He chose the hormonal therapy, which caused physical changes and a profound psychological trauma. He died 2 years later, in 1954, by cyanide poisoning.
The irony of his country destroying the life of the genius who had done so much to ensure its survival it's just painful to contemplate.
His posthumous recognition, however slow, has been significant. The ACM Turing Award is recognized as the Nobel Prize of Computing.
And though it took until 2009 for the UK Prime Minister to issue a formal apology, and until 2013 for a full royal pardon, his legacy is now universally celebrated.
We've spent this deep dive exploring the immense 4-decade sweep of Alan Turing's influence, from establishing the theoretical foundation of computation,
Saving thousands of lives at Bletchley Park, providing the blueprint for the first electronic machines, defining artificial intelligence.
and predicting the use of computation to model life itself.
His brilliance defined the machine, the universal machine that runs the world you live in. But in defining the machine, he also defined its boundaries.
And that leaves us with a final, provocative thought that circles back to the very nature of human consciousness and the limits of algorithms.
Right. Turing showed that there are mathematically defined problems like instances of the busy beaver problem, which ask for the maximum number of steps a machine of a certain size can take before halting, that are provably non-computable.
Because the halting problem prevents us from knowing whether the search will ever terminate.
Exactly. So if the human mind, in certain scenarios, appears to instantaneously grasp the impossibility or nature of non-computable problems by observing patterns and making leaps outside finite mechanical search parameters,
Does that suggest that the true wellspring of human creativity, intuition, and perhaps consciousness itself must rely on mechanisms that fundamentally lie outside the bounds of any algorithm a classical Turing machine could ever run?
something for you to mull over as you contemplate the incredible architecture of your own universal machine.
Join us and keep your curiosity well fed. Who knows? The next video might be exactly what you didn't know you needed.